thank you for coming and joining us tonight here at Orrick. My name is Jeremy RAPHAEL. I'm one of the attorneys in our technologies companies group. We are a firm that loves helping technology companies grow and prosper. A big aspect of that is helping get you connected within the community. So we hope you enjoy events like this as part of our Orrick Total Access series. If you heard about us through a friend, through Gary's guide, through another email, and you're interested in signing up for more of our events, please take a look at orricktotalaccess.com or follow us on Twitter at OrrickTA. And also on our website, you can find many of our free resources for entrepreneurs and startup companies, including term sheet generators and a lot of other online resources. We have a great event tomorrow as well on operations that you can read about and sign up for as well. And with that, we're so delighted to have you here to talk and hear more about digital health. So I'd like to turn things over to my colleague and friend, Scott Iyama, who's one of our partners in the technologies companies group.
Well, why don't we start with some introductions? Why don't we just start and go down the line, and if you can give a quick introduction about you, your company, that'd be terrific.
So I'm Kate Ryder. I'm the CEO of Maven. We are a telemedicine platform for women. So we connect women with health and wellness providers via video, and we have everyone from OBGYNs to doulas. So we try to merge health and wellness. So for everyone with your iPhone out, Maven Clinic in the App Store.
Hi, I'm Inder. I'm the founder and CEO of Kinsa. Kinsa makes these two products here. We make a physical product that connects to your phone. It's a smart thermometer. We use the data that we collect through the smart thermometer to track early indicators of illness, and that's for our broader mission of tracking and thereby stopping the spread of communicable illness.
I'm Josh Guttman. I am a partner on the early stage investing team at SoftBank Capital. We are a 20-year-old venture capital firm based here in New York with offices in Boston as well as out in Silicon Valley. And among other investments, I have the pleasure of sitting on the board of a company Cheryl is leading called Sherpa Health.
Stacking the deck here for Sherpa tonight. I'm Cheryl Swirnow. I'm the CEO of Sherpa. We aim to make healthcare accessible and affordable for businesses and their employees. So we have designed a beautiful platform that connects those employees to our doctors and our insurance navigators, making healthcare affordable for everybody.
One way to start the conversation is, what are the metrics that you're looking for in the digital health space as you evaluate investments?
I think metrics typically relate to stage of any given business. A seed stage business that might be nothing more than an idea and a strong team with no metrics and no business yet, right? A Series A, we have general constructs that we like to target. For instance, if you're selling an enterprise SaaS product like Sherpa is, and if you're doing a Series A round, we'd like to see you at or above 100K MRR, right? And if you're raising a Series B round, we like to see velocity past that towards 200, 300, somewhere beyond, and consistent progress month over month towards a higher number. But metrics are important, but they're not the only thing.
Can you define MRR?
Sorry. Oh, so MRR is monthly revenue, monthly recurring revenue for a business model that has recurring revenue.
I guess just to follow that, going to Cheryl, since you got Josh's attention, how did you pitch yourself in terms of ROI and really your value proposition?
Yeah, so our value proposition, I think, is interesting from our perspective because it speaks to our value prop and our ROI to the employer, again, because we're direct to business. So just broadly to give you guys an understanding of what we do, we hire our doctors. So our doctors work exclusively for Sherpa, which in the telehealth space is different. Most telehealth services are employing doctors that have other jobs, and they're just sort of clocking in when they have some time. And so for us, we're sort of turning the concept of how we pay for healthcare on its head, that it's not a volume-based business, which it typically is in every other aspect of healthcare, and we're trying to just pay our doctors to communicate with clients and solve their problems and not worry about whether it's 100 people a day or 5 people a day. It's just solving the problem. And so what's beautiful about that is 70% of the time, the problem stops with our doctors. So we're not sending that employee out into the healthcare system. We don't accept insurance, so when we're solving the problem, that company, that employee looks 70% healthier because we're not submitting those claims. So the ROI to the employer is your company looks healthier, therefore your insurance premiums go down. And that's what we've seen historically over our last 3 years. Last year, just as an example, our clients saw an average premium decrease of 6.5%. Contrast that with everywhere else across the country. Typically, companies saw an increase of 10 to 15% in their premiums. So the ROI is there. We're actually moving the needle in real dollars for our employer, which means that when we have an employer, they tend to stay with us. We have an extremely low churn rate of about 2% over our 3-year lifespan. So in answer to your question, to potential investors, when we're talking to them, that's the ROI to them, is that we have a huge lifetime value for our customer, and they stay with us because we have a huge value to them.
And how did you think through the regulatory issues you came through that? Because you're really innovating really healthcare workflow at that point. There's communication issues, there's privacy issues. How did you guys think through regulatory as you built them?
I think we take it really seriously. I think there are certain models, other startups outside of healthcare that can kind of wing it and sort of be gray and see how it goes. And that's not the case in healthcare. So, we have compliance lawyers. We have an entire compliance team that's focused on regulation and making sure that we are, of course, following all the HIPAA guidelines and are continuing to keep up to speed, particularly in the telemedicine space. Things change now on a near weekly basis, depending upon the state. So just staying on top of that is super important for us and key. Absolutely.
And Inder, since you're more of a consumer-facing model on that, how are you thinking through privacy as well? I know it's actually one of the biggest issues I heard downstairs, and we represent a couple companies where folks got a little over their skis in terms of privacy, 23andMe and others.
Yep.
How do you guys think about that as you're talking to consumers, not just investors?
First you have to embrace the regulations. I think I'd piggyback off the last comment that in healthcare, it's not about seeing the FDA or HIPAA compliance, the FCC. It's not about seeing that as a hurdle. It's about seeing that as part of the objective function for your product or your service. And that's certainly the way we approached it from day one. We spent the first 3 to 5 months thinking through regulatory strategy for a very simple product, right? We wanted to build a medical device where you could do iterative software development on the non-medical aspects of the software. And for those of you in regulatory, 2 years ago, that was unheard of. It was unthinkable, right? You'd have to, every single time you touch the software, you got to submit another letter to file to the FDA. And so we basically had to think through the strategy of how we were going to get the regulators very comfortable with that, and we were very successful at the end, and I'm happy to talk more about that. But it was certainly an objective, not seen as a constraint, and that was sort of the tone of the conversation internally. With consumers, I think you hit it head on, right? So our mission is about getting data. It's about gathering early indicators of spreading illness so that we can be that early warning system. So when we've gone out to the public to tell the story, we lead with that sometimes, right? And so people know. And I think it's about being transparent, designing your products well. I tend to be a little bit of a privacy phobe myself. And so creating that right balance where you're able to inform the public health system and at the same time protect the privacy of the users is critical. And I think there's a lot of language that you need to develop if you're a company like ours around that to get people comfortable with it. And it's about framing, it's about marketing, and it's also about doing the right thing.
Yeah, I would just add that as a company, we launched about a month ago. So one of the big decisions we had to take as a mobile platform, we had to build all analytics in-house, which is really painful. But on the issue of privacy, we couldn't share our data with any third parties. And so we spent an extra 2 months just making sure that, we never had to do that.
Josh, what scares you the most about privacy? You know, one of the issues that we keep running up on is, I think the folks in the panel took two kind of very thoughtful approaches. One is to make sure that they're compliant, and then the second is making sure that they're communicating with the market properly so there's no surprises. One of the issues that we run into a lot is regulators or investors, even acquirers, trying to educate themselves about privacy. It's such a touchy subject. What do you guys worry about from an investment perspective as you're evaluating these companies?
I never worry about privacy because we hire good lawyers like you to manage that piece of the puzzle for us.
I bought Josh a beer.
No, but the truth is, I actually don't. I personally don't worry about privacy because, unless if you're a startup and you're building a business, unless you're pushing the envelope, unless you're doing something a little different, you're probably not really making a dent. And so, Facebook, not a healthcare company, but maybe they will be someday. They had a lot of privacy issues at one point in their evolution. Different type of privacy, but there were a lot of privacy concerns. There was, other sorts of regulatory critique of them, and they got around it. I mean, I think, pushing the limits of what is comfortable is actually, from our perspective as investors, a good thing. You always have to navigate it. You always have to plan accordingly and get around it. But we like entrepreneurs who push the envelope.
Terrific. And I wanted to go back just to one thing you said. You built everything internally, which is, I can imagine, a very long project. As you started to think through how to take over you're entering I think a very high in demand market segment. I think it's one that hasn't been captured well. I think there's been a lot of folks that have tried it. How do you think about market opportunities as you went after this? I think the women's health market is so large, and you guys have had a lot of success just trying to get into that market. How did you go through as you were building not just your platform, but really the business?
Well, I think it helps that I am a 32-year-old woman and all of my friends are having babies right now. So one of the things that's very unique to women's health is that particularly during pregnancy and the postpartum period, you use so many different types of providers. So you can see your OBGYN, but then you'll spend just as much time with your lactation consultant, your doula, your nurse practitioner. And so I think just thinking really practically about how I, along with my friends, consume healthcare, it's not just the doctor, it's everyone else as well. And so the way that we recruited our healthcare providers at first was just going out to our friends, everyone who was having a baby, we just asked them for recommendations and referrals, and we asked them who was good. And so then we first started talking. One of my good friends from college is also a doula, so that was helpful. And then, it was pretty incredible. I think women's health is fairly underserved. From a provider perspective, they definitely think that. So we just have the most incredible mission-driven community. And now, in the beginning it was a slog. We recruited people off of LinkedIn. And now, 50% we're not even recruiting anymore, and we just have providers who are referring other providers because they see this as an opportunity to really give women care during times when, maybe the system fails them. And then from a market opportunity, we're just trying as hard as we can to, be as authentic and non-healthcare as possible. We work with a lot of incredible doctors and nurse practitioners and physical therapists from the medical side. But, we just try to speak to the consumer and to the female consumer and, constantly listen. And, our early appointments have been great, and we're getting a lot of feedback. And I think the main thing that we're learning is that women really want to see the same provider over and over again. And a lot of telemedicine, it's really transactional, and they're becoming commodity products, in my opinion. And so we're trying to build a platform that fuels this kind of relationship-driven care.
And then one follow-up question for you, and then probably for Cheryl too. As you start to think about these systems that are disrupting delivery of healthcare, so you're engaging both providers, you're dealing with self-insurers, are you thinking about what type of exit this company creates? Are you just trying to build this might not be a fair question, a large company that is just trying to create a novel delivery system? Or are you thinking about how this is going to be absorbed within the healthcare system. And where I'm going with this is Mayo, about 2 months ago, said, we want to deliver healthcare to 20 million people. They serve like 4 now. I don't know how they get that number without telemedicine. So are you thinking that this is going to be something that's going to be adopted broadly within the healthcare system? Or are you thinking about being specific providers to different entities?
All right, do you want to?
Sure. So you're asking somebody who's yeah, there's no way we want to work within the healthcare system anytime soon. We have had a few conversations, and part of the reason that we're doing what we're doing is because the healthcare system is not working for a lot of our end users. So, I think it depends on the partner and it depends on the opportunity. But ultimately, what we want to do is define what digital care looks like. And one of the, other big disruptive things in our model is that we use nurse practitioners to deliver, from a legal perspective, this is the interesting part, is to deliver primary care. And so there's 20 states where scope of practice laws are loose for them, and they now have full practice authority. Not loose, but they just can now practice as doctors. And New York just turned in January. Then there's a lot of states also where you can kind of figure it out. And then there's a few that, like California and Texas, that are pretty onerous. So we probably won't be there anytime soon using nurse practitioners. But, the idea to define what does digital care look like, I don't understand why nurse practitioners weren't part of telemedicine for so long, because telemedicine is such basic care, and nurse practitioners can absolutely do it for a much lower cost.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, I think for us, we are we're very focused right now, and for the foreseeable on direct to businesses, but certainly there's a huge need in the healthcare system, and exactly what you said. I mean, healthcare is definitely broken. When you have 5% of graduating doctors, not even getting into the nurse practitioner area, which is a whole other piece, but less than 5% of graduating doctors are going into primary care. It's just a typical supply and demand issue, and telemedicine is a great way to kind of be able to canvas a larger group of people and provide them care. It's sort of the way of the future. So absolutely, we see ourselves being able to eventually work into other healthcare systems, because that's what's going to have to happen. We'd like to lead the charge.
Kind of going along these themes of what digital health is going to, how are you guys using the data? How are you perceiving kind of the value of data that you're collecting?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll address that point in a slightly different way, right? So we're finally starting to see provision of services and care remotely through 2 of the organizations we see up here. We're also seeing a proliferation of sensors in the world that are gathering data, that are connecting people to the system. I think that is, regardless of what your stance is on privacy and data acquisition, it's inevitable. It's going to happen, and hopefully it'll happen responsibly. But you're starting to see that there's a world of real-time communication with someone who has a change in health status, and real-time sensing of population health. And that's what I think is really interesting, is this we're in this era where we're starting to see the models come out for both of those. And for us, just to sort of describe why this is so interesting a little bit, the thermometer to us was a really novel way to begin a communication with someone who's just fallen ill. It's the world's most ubiquitous product, medical product, right? It's in every home that has a small child, and you go to your thermometer as the first tool to confirm an illness, regardless of whether the fever is high or low. That's the behavior in the world, right? It's people use the thermometer to confirm an illness. That's what they do. So we're piggybacking off of that to get into a communication with someone who's just fallen ill, to help them in the moment, right? Help them respond. Do I go to see the doctor? Do I not? Potentially partnering with these guys to deliver care through the phone, so that it can actually talk to a person in real time if there's an urgent situation, and so helping the person respond, and at the same time collecting data that achieves a much larger public health mission that's rooted in my background, running a bunch of large-scale international public health programs, and that is tracking epidemiology in real time, so that you can actually respond to spreading illness, identify epidemics early. So I'm really excited about the movement. I'm not really answering your question, but I will answer one other question that was about the wearable category that was over here, which I find very interesting. Like, lots of people are wearing wearables now, and wearables are gathering lots and lots of data. But the trouble that I have when I look at connected products, whether those are wearables, whether there's health sensors, whether there's others, the trouble that I have is that there's not often a defined use case for why the connectivity is so valuable, right? There's how are you using the data? What's the purpose of the data? How are you using the connectivity to the user? What's the purpose of that connectivity? It's not often well defined. And I think there are opportunities to improve clinical trials, to communicate with the ill, to help them respond when they need. And that's sort of at that intersection of where you're seeing telemedicine and connected sensors going. And I'm really excited about that future. So I didn't really answer your question, but I hope it was
It's
helpful.
more of a business information problem rather than a big data problem. I think there's kind of an interesting distinction that you made there.
Yeah, and for us, the data is valuable for this public health mission. That's at our core. That's what drives us. That's why we get up every morning. We're super excited.
Yeah, I'll just take the contrarian view on that. I mean, I think connected devices. We're investors in Fitbit, who I think have sort of led the charge in the connected device self-optimization market. I think it's like the first or second inning, truly, in that category. In 10 or 15 years, I think if we were sitting in this room, we would all be amazed by the types of tracking that we are all probably experiencing of our bodies and of our health and of our we're just at the beginning of what this category is going to look like. With Fitbit in particular, we've seen it lead to behavioral changes, right? Because if you're, I don't know, how many of you in the room have Fitbits? Only 3? You guys are not a very tech savvy audience. How many people have a wrist band tracking device? Okay, all right.
I'm curious, how many people continue to use their wearable product after 3 months? Okay.
Yeah. So that's fair. I think what we've seen is that, Fitbit filed to go public last week, and so their numbers are public for everyone to see. But anecdotally, what we've seen is that by wearing one of these devices, it's a personal motivator. To walk more, to run more, to exercise more, and to exert more energy, to take the stairs more. I heard about a doctor last week who asked a friend of mine for his data. Say, "Oh, you've been wearing a Fitbit. Show me your data. It'll help me. It'll help inform me and form an opinion of your health." Right. So I think in the future, in the next few years, you're going to see a lot more of that.
So as an investor, what do you think the biggest market opportunity is there?
I spoke on the phone with the company this morning who is focused on the home care market for the infirmed and elderly population, and imagine how you could call it a connected device, or you could call it a wearable, or you could just call it an iPad that requires somebody to check in and register their vitals every day. That is like, I have a 94-year-old grandmother, and that's a game-breaking solution for a lot of elderly people and their families who want to monitor and make sure they're okay.
I have a question on that for the data side. Outside of digital health, everyone's always saying we want the painkiller, we don't want the vitamin. Whereas this, where it's data, it's almost like a vitamin where it's proactive rather than reactive. Can you guys touch upon that on what is or maybe across the whole panel, in the proactive delivery versus the reactive? Is there value that's equal in the proactive delivery as opposed to reactive? Everybody wants Tylenol, not everyone wants the vitamin.
I think preventative medicine is a core part of this discussion. Actually, Cheryl's co-founder, is a big proponent and student of of preventative medicine. I don't know if you have anything to add.
I mean, for us, our opinion has always been, and Dr. Parkinson, who's my co-founder, is a pediatrician and preventive medicine doctor, so we live this. Our feeling on prevention, both from the proactive and reactive side, is accessibility is the best form of wellness and prevention. If you can access somebody, in any means the second that there's a problem, that prevents it from becoming a larger problem, and it theoretically solves the problem. So that's really how we think about it. Inherently, sort of what we have is inherently going to be a reactive service. You're going to contact us when there's an issue. But we also work very hard around the data to get an understanding in terms of our larger population and then within a specific company to spot trends and then proactively reach out to the community and say, for example, it's allergy season. Reach out if you have any questions. When there's new changes on the ACA, reaching out to ask for questions on insurance. So I think you have to strike a balance, but I do think healthcare in many ways is just inherently reactive, and the way to think about prevention is just accessibility, in our opinion.
The issue, right, with wellness versus treating a sick patient is that in a shorter time period, shorter time horizon, if you do an ROI on wellness, it's very poor. Whereas getting a COPD or CHF patient to not go to the ER the next time, the ROI is insanely high.
I think that depends. I'll push back on that a little bit because I think the broad understanding of wellness is that it's a blanket plan. We're all going to lose weight this month, and it doesn't matter who you are. That's the wellness. And I think if you can create, again, that accessibility every time that we're talking, one of our doctors is talking to a patient, it's a personal health plan. So we're dealing with you specifically. So it's not this broad blanket solution. It is individually, and that can prevent somebody from going to the ER or making an expensive choice, and that's where the ROI is. And again, going back to what I had said previously, if you don't have a doctor and you don't have accessibility to a doctor, which is extremely common, particularly in working age population, you are going to go to the ER if there's any kind of an issue. So I think what you're saying is totally true, but I do think it's the difference between a blanket solution and a sort of personal health solution.
Yeah, and
I mean, like a hospital stay in a skilled nursing facility for $40,000 versus,
An urgent care center. Right. Exactly. Total.
But it is interesting because, I think you're right, corporate ROI on wellness programs is pretty poor, but hospitals are also getting financially incentivized on patient satisfaction scores, and wellness is a huge part of that. So there is ROI there.
As a data point, I think you had a really good question about preventative. On the deals that we track, actually, companies targeting preventative medicine are the second highest growth for us in the digital health space.
That's what I figured out. It's kind of like that's the wing wins. It's like that's what puck is going, and that's what law is. And I just want to validate that with people that are actually in it, that we're betting on that. And because again, in every other industry, they're like, we want pain tools, we don't want pleasure.
I think you just have to have a good product,
Sure, go ahead.
A question for Maven. The question is, how have you resolved the telemedicine reimbursement question with your platform? And then, two, are you engaging with payers? And if so, are you running studies to focus efficacy? I'm curious, what population targeting what disease conditions, where are you going to, and how have you resolved it?
Yeah, so right now we're not working with payers, but our cheapest appointment is $18 for 10 minutes with a nurse practitioner, and he or she can prescribe and whatnot. So we're actually cheaper than a copay in that sense, and we do help our customers actually submit for reimbursement against the deductible. So we're doing a lot around that. I think basically as we get into we're getting into very condition-specific things, so fertility, postpartum depression, stuff like that. I think payers themselves, for instance, prenatal care. Payers aren't as worried about that, so that might for us always be a wellness product. But then we're just we've actually, one of the things that's been surprising is college girls are also interested in Maven for birth control prescriptions and questions. But I think it's just as we uncover what kind of issues that women have during this period that payers are interested in, then we'll work with them. And so in early conversations, and I have them every once in a while just to kind of understand what's on payers' minds, it's postpartum care.
So I have a question for Maven and Sherpa. Where do you see the future of nutrition services being delivered through these platforms by registered dietitian nutritionists that specialize in all different areas like fertility, prenatal, fitting into diabetes, self-management, obesity, all that? Where do you see that going?
So far, all of the, a lot of our nutritionists, well, all the appointments that we've delivered so far in the nutrition category have been around prenatal nutrition, like a lot of really sick women unable to keep food down, or meal planning and weight loss. So in the near term, we're developing a more structured meal planning and kind of post-session note to support the weight loss and the use cases that we're seeing. But what we're just trying to listen. I'm not totally sure, but that's the first thing that we're doing.
We definitely see it as a key part of preventative care, and it's a huge piece of the puzzle for us. A lot of people want to understand just education at the most basic level. So the way that we work, the doctors that we hire are all primary care doctors. Some have subspecialties, potentially like nutritionists, but at this point we're referring out to people that we think are really great in the space and getting them out there. But it's a huge piece of the puzzle for sure. Yeah.
I actually have patients referred to me from
Oh, awesome. We'll have to talk. That's what we do.
I have maybe a more basic question for telemedicine. How do you have your doctors confirm or, I guess, measure a patient's symptoms over the phone?
So So the question is, how do doctors for telemedicine confirm? How do they treat? How do they do a diagnosis and know what is being asked is appropriate? The way that we work, we have sort of two ways that employees can contact us. It's through our platform or over the phone. We leave it up to the employee, and 98% of the time they prefer over our platform, which works a lot like text messaging and email. I think what's interesting from our perspective, and sort of going back to data and how we think about data, almost all of healthcare is verbal between the doctor and the patient forgets like most of what a doctor says because there's so much coming at you in a very small amount of time. So we have structured data points. So when somebody comes at us, for example, with sore throat, we have a set data points, questions that we're going to ask, which are similar to what a doctor would ask in a room with you, but you have a minute to take a beat, think about it, and then respond, and then we can structure a diagnosis from there. So we don't really, we're not super concerned about there being a misdiagnosis from that end, and knock wood, we've never had an issue with that. Granted, most of the reasons that people are reaching out to us are for sort of acute care issues where the level is sort of low there. But it's not super different than what happens in a doctor's office, but it's almost safer because there is a huge paper trail and people have a minute to think about their actual symptoms and respond. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and just, there's a statistic from the American Telemedicine Association that, about 70% of these appointments can be resolved via just communicating with a provider. So, we've had someone go to the ER actually after speaking to one of our providers so far, just one, but that was what should have happened, and everything else has been resolved through our platform.
Two on the end. Will you prescribe narcotics?
Nope.
No, I mean, that's the big fight in telemedicine right now is like, what can you prescribe, what can't you prescribe, what states and whatnot. So we just follow those guidelines.
Going back to preventative medicine, there's a lot of pilot programs out there where insurance companies are giving people some type of tracking device, and if you seem healthy, they're deducting your, how much you have to pay and stuff like that. What are you guys? Everyone's been talking about data. What are the metrics that these insurance companies really should be looking for in terms of building better insurance plans and being preventive and understanding who they are insuring? What are the metrics that they should be looking for that that maybe they are or they aren't right now?
So we actually just wrote a piece. If you go to scope.sherpa.com, that's our blog, and we just wrote a piece about how insurance companies determine premiums. So that's a great sort of answer to that. The true answer is that insurance companies are looking for the highest cost, highest ticket items for them. So it's diagnostic tests, it's continued disease that's going to cost them the most amount of money. I mean, they're looking at sort of the big picture. But whenever somebody makes a poor choice in healthcare, meaning they're going to an ER when it isn't something that needed to happen, that costs the insurance companies money as well. So they're trying to make sure that that generally people are taking precautions from a preventative place. They're exercising, they're not smoking. It's all of the things that we know, and doing that on a large population is what actually keeps premiums in check, broadly.
So I think a lot of these are really ambitious, disruptive business plans. How do you think about accessing capital for them? Inder, for example, you're going after both a consumer market, there's a big data play. Are you thinking that accessing capital for these types of markets really comes through venture funding, someone like Josh? Is it, in the case of Sherpa or Maven, are you trying to get self-insured companies to invest, or is it really going to be a revenue model? How are these companies growing? What are you thinking through from a growth strategy?
For us, we've raised money from VCs in the recent past, closed our Series A in November. I think the answer is you need money to build the business, and you beg, borrow, steal, and claw to figure out who to get it from. The CEO's time, I hate to say it, in an early stage company is there's a big chunk of it dedicated to fundraising. We've gone the VC route. Would we take money from others? Sure. We have a particular bend. We're pretty cautious about the investment thesis. For example, I'll make two comments. We're very cautious about investment thesis, and I think it would behoove, sorry, I'm going to step back. It would behoove most entrepreneurs to be very cautious about the investment thesis. And I'll just articulate it in this way. We have not accepted money from an investor who has a healthcare hypothesis, a healthcare investment thesis in our company. In other words, they don't see a cool gadget that they want to go ahead and sell. It's not a medical device. They don't see it as a tool to just help people direct them to the care they need. They have a big data investment thesis behind it. And it's really important to me that they have a big data investment thesis, because my mission is about the data and tracking the spread of disease. That's why I do what I do, right? And so it's really important that the mission align with the investment thesis. So whoever I pitch to, that's my first screen. Why are you here? Why are you interested? I will tell you that for us, raising a seed round in this time period is not hard. It's not. Raising a Series A is much harder. I will tell you that when we went to raise our Series A, we had lots of conversations with the tech community, and we had lots of conversations with the health community. Neither was willing to make a call by themselves. So it was interesting, because a lot of our advisors said, well, you have two different investment pools, right? You can go to either one and they'll both be interested. And at the end of the day, what we found, the reality, and I've talked to a bunch of people that work in the intersection of hardware, software, and healthcare about this, and they all agree, is that there's actually a much, much, much smaller subset of people who understand both tech and healthcare that are willing to make the investment in the call. And I'm grateful that we got an amazing VC. We were backed by Kleiner Perkins, right, which is an amazing VC. But these were hard conversations, it's actually a much smaller pool for us than you would have expected. It's because it's people who know both. So I'm not sure if that's other people's experience or not, but that certainly was true for us.
So I used to actually work in venture capital, so I can attest that it's very hard. I mean, most funds invest in about 1% of what they see. So I think, if anyone in the audience is raising a seed round right now, it's just, one of the coolest things about today is that there's a lot of opportunities for capital, and not just the traditional angel investor network, but crowdfunding platforms, accelerators. There's just a lot you can do if you're interested in raising a seed round. And then I think in healthcare, healthcare is not an industry like a social network. So it's not like you're going to have 10,000 users on day 3 of the business. And so I think it's just finding the right investors who understand that and who really believe in the product. And it's fine if they don't really know a lot about healthcare, as long as they kind of believe in you and the product.
Cheryl, when you're going through the process, most of the data suggests that of the investors participating in kind of the umbrella of digital health, something like 90% only make one investment. So there's a lot of people, A, kicking the tires, or B, just trying to get a company that they could say is digital health in their portfolio to make their limiteds happy. When you went through this fundraising process, how did you find Josh? How did you sort out the people that are kicking the tires?
Yeah, I mean, for us, very similar to your experience, like we don't, and I think you had said this earlier too, we don't think of ourselves necessarily as a healthcare company. We happen to be delivering healthcare, but we definitely think we're more of, we're an enterprise business and we're a service business. We're providing a service. So similar to what you said, we were actively looking for people that didn't have healthcare background and experience. We thought that made it richer. And we had healthcare expertise already, internally and in terms of advisors. So for us, that made it easier, but it is a hot space. I think anybody that's in healthcare has a different a different perspective than some other areas, because you do get hit up, I think, a lot more than other spaces. And I think it's just when you get into a relationship with an investor, it is like a marriage. And so it's you have to ask the right questions. You're with them for forever. And so you want to make sure that you're both, that your mission is something that they believe in and that they're attesting to it. We're married, that they're attesting to it, and that, that it's aligned for sure.
Sounds good. So we're over our time, but if it's okay, we can take more questions.
Sure.
Sure, go ahead.
Hi. I wanted to ask about older adults and telehealth. So my company is Home Care and Tech, like you were speaking about before. We can send data in advance, but one of the big ordeals we have is trying to get some of our clients to the doctor. Like it's either they need someone to accompany them, or sometimes we have to send an ambulance to pick them up. So telehealth would be great, but it's hard to get someone who is very old or has dementia on Skype or whatever else. Any ideas about how you might help that? Or is it just they're disconnected? I mean that's the problem. And if there's a home health aid in the house, that can help. But any other sort of little things you might have noticed that you could prompt?
I'm not sure how much help I can be in that. I think for us, we're not using video. That was a conscious effort, irrespective of age. And so I think when you think about, for us, our platform and the ways to communicate is essentially email and phone, which, my grandmother emails now. I mean, so trying to make it accessible and not complex and really explaining how to use it, I would imagine, would be something that does make it, easier. For us, also, only 10% of our developer resources go to what our end users see. So we just try to make everything dead stupid simple, which makes it more accessible. I think the more bells and whistles you have, the more complicated it is, the easier it is for anybody, again, regardless of age, to kind of tune out. But I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that.
I think so. Let's see. So one thing I think that's a barrier that makes it tough, but again, you can always figure out a way around it, is essentially that they're not as tech savvy. So a kind of funny story from us is that with our one nurse practitioner that we work with is 65, and so she was like, okay, iOS, and she bought a computer, and she didn't buy an iPad, and didn't know the difference. And so I think it's education around that, and then also hearing, and that's the other kind of thing that can be difficult, and seeing and all of that, and so I think that's why. But absolutely, I think there's a lot of amazing products in the ecosystem to help that. So it's probably bringing a lot of them in and working with those technological constraints, really.
Okay, so I think there's a lot of research opportunities here. There's a whole funding of research called PCORI, which is a patient-centered outcome. I'm hearing a lot about data, I'm hearing a lot about money, and I'm not hearing a lot about consumers. And so there has been work with actually elderly patients who happen to have Parkinson's. And there's a whole $22 million grant looking at whether or not these folks will use telemedicine. And they will. And not only will they, they're asking for it. And I think what we need to do in this arena is take a look at the research and see what we can do to support it, and to think about what it is that patients and our consumers are really asking for, because sometimes it's not what we're delivering.
I'll just give you an anecdote. So we did a little bit of market research ourselves, and we found that there was a generational thing. So this might just be technology adoption and diffusion and getting used to these kinds of new technologies, but we found that there's a generational divide. We found that moms are our target customer. Moms over the age of 34 would look at the gadget and would be like, that's interesting. Do I need another thing that connects to my phone? Do I need another thing, right? And when they started getting towards my age, it became more and more profound. But under the age of 34, the response was, generally under the age of 34, the response was, oh, cool, it's all centered on my phone, right? Everything, like my phone is the center of my universe and it has everything on it. So we found that there's this really interesting generational thing in just the gut response to our product. I don't know if that's telling in any way, but we found that really interesting. And the only other thing that I will comment on is, listen, healthcare typically, traditionally, doesn't do user experience well. It doesn't. It does not do user experience well. But in order to succeed in the world in which we're operating, you have to do user experience well. And user experience is, I think, at the heart of anybody up here and any organization that's thinking about this new, whether it's service delivery, product delivery, the user experience has to be beautiful, elegant. It has to delight users from the very first touch. Else it won't be used. And so that has to be at the heart of anything. And I think that's when you're going to start to see technology diffuse to the masses, is when there's a beautiful, elegant, great user experience. And we know healthcare typically doesn't do it well. Let's change that. Right? So
I want to do two more.
So just about the person's point about smartphones and stuff, another piece of research is that boomers actually lead the pack of using smartphones. And that it's part of the reason why the smartphones have been adopted. One of the questions I wanted to ask, which Cheryl, you touched upon, was that the healthcare market is broken. Each of you are doing fantastic things to address critical gaps. But the fact is that it is a system. It's really big. In the U.S., it's about 300 million people. What kind of collaborations do you guys see doing with either each other or some of the startups in this room to really address the systemic challenges of the healthcare? Because it really is too big for anyone else.
Totally. And I don't think anybody here is trying to solve every problem in healthcare, because I think that would just be a silly proposition. So our stance has always been anybody that's trying to fix something in healthcare, we're all for it. We don't see that as competition, and we're always open to working with anybody that's doing something interesting. If it makes sense and there's collaboration, as you had mentioned, I think there's room for both of our companies and all of our companies to be working together. So I think that's actually a really interesting and unique piece about healthcare, especially in this space, is that's typically the response, at least that we've seen and heard from other people in the space, is like, yeah, let's work together, because it's an enormous systemic problem that no one company is going to be able to solve as a whole.
I'd echo that too. I mean, startups, and this is not necessarily a health tech startup thing. I think this is a startup thing. Startups generally like to partner with others, right? And the unfortunate part is that I'm not sure the big institutions want to yet embrace partnering with startups at the pace that the startups want to partner, right? Because they may be willing to do it, it just might be a 1.5 year lead time, right? So that's a problem for a startup. So I think that there's a little bit of a mismarriage there with the big companies and the startups, often, not always, but certainly startups tend to move quickly with each other. And I'm open. I'm sure I've had discussions with several of the organizations up here and others about collaborating. So
yeah, I mean, I think we might be collaborating. Is that right? So, but no, I think also one of the frustrating things about working in healthcare is that I think in the larger bureaucratic institutions, whether it's healthcare system, healthcare payers, whether it's hospitals, and I have physicians in my family, so I can say this, but there's just a hugely frustrating debate between kind of people who really think progressively and then more of this kind of, because as a startup we can't work with payers day one, that would just kill our business. And so and then people who kind of are more intellectually minded socialists and focused on the care, and then there's people who focus on the kind of bigger picture and how do you deliver more people care, how do you innovate, how do you deliver more efficient care, how do you deliver higher quality care. And so in my experience, we did have one experience where we were kind of grandfathered into a hospital, and it was so slow, and it was and suddenly this same debate, which I've been hearing within my own family, because I have one uncle who's a cardiologist who has an MBA, and he's married to my aunt who is on the other side, who's all about like patient quality provider quality and whatnot. And then we came up against this same debate, and we kind of then abandoned it. And so I think as a result, it's just a really tough industry to move fast in and to get buy-in from.
Okay, well, thank you so much for staying over, and thank you very much for the panel. Thanks.
Thanks.